Hi. So, what is one of the most important things, not just on a twin flame journey? The twin flame journey is just an accelerated journey of coming into inner union, but in on any journey, and that is to surrender and judgment. Because when we judge things, it pulls us out of surrender because we start to judge things as good and we start to judge things as bad. And then you have a huge problem because you've put things into categories of good and bad, and you're constantly living in judgment and you're out of your like higher perspective because the higher source only sees movement and sees forward movement and evolution as a soul. And when you judge something as bad, you're making a judgment from a very limited perspective because you're making a judgment based on your 3D experience and your 3D vision without being able to see the higher perspective. Say, for example, you go out in the morning and you buy and you want to go and buy a coffee and then you realize that you've forgotten your blooming money and you have to go back home. You would judge that experience from your 3D perspective as being bad. However, what you didn't see is that maybe if you'd have got the coffee and been an extra 2 minutes, then you might have been run over by a bus on your way home. And this is just an example of not being able to see the bigger picture. So everything that happens via evolution. The soul doesn't really care about day-to-day experiences and what happens on a day-to-day experience for our enjoyment. It cares about growth, it cares about evolving, and it cares about coming into inner union and completing ascension and returning to your twin flame ultimately. It doesn't care about what we as humans perceive as bad. We perceive a lot of things as bad that actually are acting in a higher from a higher awareness to help us to evolve, and actually that will end up being good. It's like, how many of you going through this journey would say, oh, I wish this didn't happen, or at the time you'd be like, oh, I really wish I'd never have gotten on this journey, and then in years time you'll look back and you'll be like, oh my god, thank god I went through that and I evolved and I grew and I went through all that pain because it forged me into something else. We look from this really limited experience of being human beings and being in these vessels in these forms, but the soul is eternal and it just wants to grow and it just wants to evolve through the path that it's chosen to evolve through. So by judging an experience, we're taking ourselves out of surrender, and we all do it, it's natural. I still say, oh, that was bad or that was good or whatever, but I'm aware that it's coming from a place of judgment, and I'm getting much better at it because surrender is the true art to being happy, because we surrender to everything being for a reason. So when we go to the shops and we can't get a coffee, we understand that there is a reason for not being able to get that coffee, because down the line, I mean, that's obviously a very silly, stupid example, but you don't know what not that moment of frustration could have led to and helped you. Maybe then you leave and you meet somebody who changes your life, like you don't know how life works, and it's very impossible from this limited perspective to understand how situations are going to change and affect your life and your growth. So by non-judgment, we naturally go into mode of surrender. The whole spiritual journey is very linked like that. Like you can say the whole journey is about non-judgment, or the whole journey is about surrender, or the whole journey is about unconditional love, or the whole journey is it continues. But really they're all one of the same thing, because when you have non-judgment, you basically are surrendering, because you're surrendering to having a judgment on your experience and you're allowing it to unfold, which speeds everything up and allows the good things to come to you, or the things that you perceive as good to come to you quicker, because you're accepting the things that are not as favorable and accepting their purpose in your life. And that allows them to kind of move out quicker, because you don't need that lesson of them showing up anymore. So they can kind of move through quickly. It's like you just let them pass. Surrendering is sort of accepting that there's going to be things that you don't want to happen, but you just accept that they've happened and you let them go. And that really takes you very quickly into a higher place, and it does allow things that you will like to come in and find you. It's just accepting that everything is happening to you for a reason. Now, it's really, really, really hard to surrender on these high emotional connection journeys. And that's for a reason, because there's a lot to be learned from them before you can surrender. But you will eventually get to a place of true surrender. There's so many stages of surrender. There's like, I've surrendered. And then a couple of months down the line, you're like, oh, I actually wasn't that surrendered and I have to surrender again. Then another 2 months down the line, you're like, oh, yeah, actually, I have to still surrender again. And then eventually you get to a point where it just becomes easier and easier and easier to surrender. And you realise that surrendering is going to be an ongoing process, but it becomes a more natural way of being rather than trying to control and trying to judge things, because that's really what holds us apart on this journey. You know, there's a lot of different lessons and a lot of different things, but that is one of the key ones, is looking at ways that you are trying to control things coming together, and you're not just allowing it and leaving it to unfold naturally, which was actually probably how the whole journey began for you in the first place, was you weren't looking for it and it naturally found you. But then you can't, even though you feel an energetic connection, you can't trust that there's some other powers at work. So you try to control it desperately because you don't understand, and you're like, oh, I have to do this to make this person like me, or I have to message this, or if I message this, they might not like me, and I have to put this kind of makeup on, and I have to wear this kind of watch, and I have to have this kind of job, and I need to make my Facebook profile look like this. And do you know what, I'm going to message them because I don't trust them to message me. Or do you know what, I'm going to ignore them because then they'll chase me. And just be really, really honest with yourself about, this is a great exercise to do, is to write down all the ways in which you're still trying to control how your union takes place rather than just completely surrendering it, because it might really surprise you some of the ways that you're still controlling when you felt like you've surrendered. So I think that's a really good exercise to do, is to see how many ways you're still controlling your appearance, your actions, the things you do. Any form of chasing is trying to control, because, and it all comes from a fear. It comes from a fear of being left or forgotten about. But I mean, how many times have you actually forgotten about somebody just because they're not messaging you? Probably you'll answer none. But it comes from an inner fear that you'll be abandoned or forgotten about. And then ignoring comes from a fear of rejection. And then there's all these fears of not being worthy enough. So you have to pretend to be this person, or you're afraid to be your true self. So that's something that you could do this morning if you haven't done it before. Is just try and list every way that you feel like you're still subtly trying to control how your union happens, and see if you can surrender those, because we're coming into December now, and this is a great time to just let go of everything, or try, you know. Like I said, at some points it's impossible, you have stuff to learn from the journey, but the quicker we can move into that real true surrender, the better, I feel. And that's just a message that I wanted to share today. So I'll leave you alone now.